1925, Kansas. A schoolteacher led 18 students into the woods and never returned alive. Harper's Ridge looked like any other quiet town in Kansas in 1925. Red brick schoolhouses, dusty streets, and windswept fields stretched as far as the eye could see. On the surface, life was simple, even idyllic. But beneath the calm, the town carried a weight of unspoken fears. The townspeople were close-knit. Everyone knew everyone else's business, or at least they thought they did. Children played freely in the streets. Women hung laundry in the sunlight, and farmers tended their fields. Yet, in the evenings, a restless hush would settle over Harper's Ridge. Windows shuttered early. Footsteps echoed in empty alleys. And sometimes, just sometimes, the wind carried the faint sound of someone calling for help. It was the kind of place where a schoolteacher could be trusted without question. Miss Evelyn Harper, a slender woman in her early 30s with dark hair and piercing blue eyes, had been teaching at the Harper's Ridge Elementary for nearly 5 years. She was admired by her students, respected by parents, and admired by colleagues. Her classroom was always orderly, her lessons inspiring. Children adored her, and their laughter seemed to follow her down the hallways. But people whispered, not openly, but quietly, in the dark corners of the general store or behind the lace curtains of their homes. Some said Miss Harper had a strange way of looking at people, like she could see past their bodies and right into their souls. Others claimed she often wandered into the woods alone at night, speaking softly as though someone, or something, answered her. No one knew why. Some chalked it up to eccentricity. Others felt a chill when she walked by. Yet no one suspected that these whispers would one day foreshadow one of the darkest days in the town's history. It began on a crisp October morning. The sun barely peeked over the horizon as the children arrived at school, their breaths clouding the air. Miss Harper greeted each of her 18 students with a warm smile. There was a sense of excitement that morning, an almost electric anticipation, though no one could say why. By mid-morning, Miss Harper had gathered the children and announced a surprise nature walk in the nearby woods. The parents, accustomed to trusting her judgment, barely hesitated. After all, it wasn't unusual for her to take the class outdoors for lessons about plants, animals, or geography. No one imagined the danger that awaited them. The woods loomed at the edge of town, dense and shadowed. Tall oaks and maples formed a nearly impenetrable canopy, and the ground was littered with fallen leaves and hidden roots. It was beautiful, yes, but it was also isolating. Once you stepped inside, the town disappeared behind you. Some of the older children had joked about ghost stories, warning the younger ones to stay close. Miss Harper reassured them with her usual calm demeanor, and they followed, trusting her implicitly. No one saw them again. Hours passed. The school bell rang, dismissing other classes. The empty classroom grew silent. Parents began to trickle in, asking questions. Some laughed nervously, thinking the walk was just taking longer than usual. But as the shadows grew long, worry settled like a stone in their chests. They could not yet know that Harper's Ridge was about to become a town forever haunted by the whispers of the woods. Footsteps, once so familiar and safe, had vanished, and the peaceful streets of Harper's Ridge were suddenly too quiet. Evelyn Harper was not just any schoolteacher. To the children of Harper's Ridge, she was a figure of wonder. She could make history lessons feel like adventures and arithmetic like a puzzle waiting to be solved. Her laugh was bright, infectious, and rare in a town where life was often hard and mundane. Parents trusted her completely, leaving their most precious possessions, their children, in her care. But there were cracks beneath the surface of her perfection. Miss Harper had secrets, though no one knew what they were. She lived alone in a modest clapboard house at the edge of town. The neighbors rarely saw her outside, except when she walked to school or ran errands. There were no friends over for tea, no invitations to the town's gatherings. Some said she was shy. Others whispered that she was different, even strange. Children, however, adored her. They spoke of her in hushed tones at recess, describing the way she would kneel beside them to inspect a scraped knee or read their stories with exaggerated voices that made them laugh until they cried. Yet there was an intensity to her gaze, something almost hypnotic, a lingering look that seemed to hold more than affection. It was the kind of look that made people feel seen and unsettled at the same time. Town gossip hinted at her past. Rumors floated that she had spent years teaching in the deep woods of Missouri, working with children who had been abandoned or orphaned. Some said she had faced tragedies herself, siblings lost, parents gone, but no one knew for certain. Every mention of her past was shadowed by ambiguity. In Harper's Ridge, people respected her, yes, but they also feared the unknown within her. On the morning of the fateful walk, Evelyn's behavior was noted as unusual by only a few. She was more animated than usual, almost restless. She moved through the classroom with a precision that bordered on obsession. She spoke softly to the children, her words almost too persuasive, compelling them to gather their things and follow her without question. Some older students later recalled a subtle intensity in her voice, as if she were speaking to them and also to the forest itself. The children, trusting and eager, obeyed. They followed her past the school gates, down the dirt road, and toward the dense woods that loomed at the town's edge. Nobody in Harper's Ridge could imagine the danger waiting just beyond the tree line. Some historians later suggested that Evelyn's behavior was more than eccentricity. It was almost ritualistic. She seemed to draw energy from the forest, from the isolation, from the children themselves. Locals recalled that she often lingered at the edge of the trees in the evenings, whispering to herself. Some claimed she carried small trinkets or charms, though no one ever dared to confirm it. Despite her charm and intelligence, there was a shadow to Evelyn Harper, one that grew larger with every passing day she spent leading her students into the woods. Parents who had once adored her now wondered, was she truly the dedicated teacher they believed in, or had something darker taken root in her heart? As the children disappeared, the town would confront this question with horror and disbelief. Evelyn Harper, once beloved, would become a symbol of fear. And the mystery surrounding her life and her intentions would haunt Harper's Ridge for decades to come. The line between admiration and suspicion had always been thin. On that October morning, it snapped entirely. The school bell rang at 8 o'clock sharp, echoing through the hallways of Harper's Ridge Elementary. Its metallic clang marked the start of another ordinary day, or so everyone believed. Inside Miss Harper's classroom, pencils scratched paper, and the children settled into their seats. The morning air smelled faintly of chalk dust and autumn leaves drifting in through cracked windows. By mid-morning, a sense of anticipation had settled over the room. Miss Harper's eyes sparkled with a peculiar intensity. She moved gracefully between desks, checking on students, her voice calm but insistent. Then, as if on cue, she rose and announced a surprise, a nature walk in the nearby woods. The children gasped with delight. For weeks, they had studied maps, learned about trees, and heard stories of hidden wildlife. Now, the forest awaited them. Parents nodded when the announcement came. It was typical of Miss Harper to organize outdoor lessons. Many returned home, believing their children would be safe. They had no reason to doubt her. The march toward the woods began with laughter. 18 pairs of small feet crunched through fallen leaves, their voices ringing out. The forest seemed welcoming at first. Sunlight flickered through the branches, birds chirped, and a crisp wind carried the scent of pine and earth. Miss Harper led confidently, guiding her students deeper along a narrow, twisting path. But soon, the woods began to change. Shadows stretched unnaturally, and the laughter faltered. The trees grew taller, their trunks thick and dark. A hush fell over the group, broken only by the occasional snap of a branch underfoot. Some of the older children whispered nervously, glancing back toward the town they could no longer see. Miss Harper, however, remained composed. Her voice, though soft, carried an authority that kept the children moving forward. They trusted her implicitly. After all, she had always kept them safe. But in those hours, that trust would become a fragile thread, teetering on the edge of something unfathomable. By late afternoon, the townspeople began to notice the absence. Bells had rung for dismissal hours earlier, yet the children had not returned. Parents trickled to the school, worry etching lines across their faces. Teachers checked classrooms, desks, and playgrounds. The playground swings moved gently in the breeze, empty and eerie. At first, some assumed it was a simple delay. Perhaps the walk had taken longer than expected. But as daylight waned and shadows stretched across the town, unease turned to panic. Whispers of fear spread from house to house. A mother clutched her apron to her chest. Another father's hands shook as he stared down the empty street. By sunset, it was undeniable. The 18 children were missing. Panic gripped Harper's Ridge. Lanterns flickered to life in windows as families prepared to search, calling names into the gathering darkness. Each voice was met with silence. No laughter answered. No footsteps returned. The forest held only whispers and secrets. In the days that followed, the town would replay that morning endlessly. The bell, once a symbol of routine and comfort, now rang in memory like a mournful warning. Each ring seemed to ask the same haunting question: what had happened in the woods? And so, the last bell of that fateful day became a grim echo, a reminder that Harper's Ridge would never again feel entirely safe. Something had changed in those woods, something unseen, leaving only fear and unanswered questions in its wake. When the townspeople arrived at the edge of the forest that evening, the first thing they noticed was the silence. No birds chirped, no wind rustled the leaves. The woods seemed to be holding its breath, waiting, and then they saw the footprints. Deep impressions in the wet earth led from the path near the schoolhouse and vanished into the dense trees. Small shoes, tiny boots, and the prints of an adult, the unmistakable trail of Miss Harper, wound their way through the underbrush. The mud was soft, almost too perfect in recording every step, yet it told no story beyond the movement itself. The footprints ended abruptly. There was no sign of struggle, no indication of where the 18 children had gone. A chill ran through those who followed the trail. The forest was darker than it had seemed from the edge. Shadows clung to the trunks of trees, and the smell of damp earth mingled with something faintly sweet, like decayed leaves or forgotten flowers. Every snapped twig sounded like a warning. Volunteers whispered among themselves, their voices trembling, trying to make sense of what they saw. The footprints were the first clue, the only tangible proof that the children had entered the woods. But they were also the cruelest. The mud held the memory of their passage, yet offered no answers. No sign of the teacher's voice, no hint of where the small figures had wandered. It was as if the forest itself had swallowed them whole. Some of the townspeople tried to rationalize what they saw. Perhaps the children had followed a hidden trail deeper into the woods, one Miss Harper knew. Perhaps they had wandered into a creek bed or a cave nearby. Others whispered darker possibilities, theories that made even the bravest shiver. Some spoke of unseen figures, something ancient and malevolent, drawn to the laughter of children. As night fell, the search became desperate. Lanterns bobbed in the trees, their light barely piercing the darkness. Volunteers shouted names, their voices swallowed by the forest. The footprints offered no guidance. Every branch seemed to conceal a shadow. Every rustle of leaves hinted at movement that wasn't there. Families clung to each other, fear etching deep lines into their faces. By midnight, the first searchers returned to town, empty-handed. The mud had hardened in the cold night air, preserving the footprints like a silent accusation. The forest loomed beyond, dark and impenetrable, daring anyone to step inside and uncover its secrets. The parents could not sleep. They lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, imagining the children wandering unseen paths, calling silently for help. Each shadow in their homes became a threat, each creak of the floorboard a signal that someone was watching. Harper's Ridge had crossed into a nightmarish reality, where fear became the only constant. The footprints in the mud remained as the only testament to that day. They were proof that the children had entered the woods. They were also proof that something had taken them, leaving behind only a question with no answer. Every footprint was a reminder that Harper's Ridge would never forget. And every whisper of the forest carried the promise of a mystery that would haunt the town for years to come. In the days following the disappearance, Harper's Ridge was enveloped in a suffocating silence. The usual sounds of the town, church bells, horse hooves, children playing, were replaced by murmurs of fear. And then came the whispers. It started with a few voices claiming to hear something in the forest at night. Soft, indistinct words carried on the wind. Some said they were cries of children calling for help. Others claimed the sound was Miss Harper's voice, calm and beckoning, as if inviting someone deeper into the trees. No two accounts were the same, yet everyone agreed on one thing. The forest was alive in a way it had never been before. The local sheriff attempted to investigate, leading small groups with lanterns into the woods. Each step felt heavier than the last. The deeper they went, the louder the whispers became, though the source remained elusive. Trees loomed like silent sentinels, their branches reaching out like skeletal hands. Shadows shifted unnaturally, making it impossible to distinguish reality from imagination. Locals began reporting strange phenomena beyond hearing voices. Windows rattled in empty houses. Doors creaked open on their own. Footsteps echoed through silent streets at night. People swore they saw figures moving just beyond the tree line, disappearing whenever anyone approached. Panic began to take hold, and superstition spread like wildfire. Some claimed the forest was cursed, that Miss Harper had been possessed, or that some ancient presence had claimed the children. Families became increasingly paranoid. Mothers refused to let their remaining children wander near the woods. Fathers patrolled the town at night, lanterns shaking in their hands. Even the bravest townsfolk avoided the forest after dusk, fearful of what whispers might lure them in. Meanwhile, the search parties had uncovered fragments of evidence: a torn shoe near a creek, a backpack snagged in the brambles, a notebook with lessons Miss Harper had prepared. Each item was a cruel tease, proof of the children's presence, and yet offering no answers. It was as if the woods themselves were taunting the town, showing that they had been inside, and then hiding them away forever. The whispers grew stronger with each passing night. Some townspeople swore that if you listened closely, you could hear the children counting, singing, or reciting lessons Miss Harper had taught. Others heard pleading, desperate calls, as if the forest itself mourned what had been lost. No one dared enter alone, and even groups felt the oppressive pull of unseen eyes watching from the darkness. Harper's Ridge had changed. The woods, once a place of play and exploration, had become a living nightmare. Fear seeped into every home, every conversation. And through it all, the whispers persisted, a constant reminder that the forest held secrets the town might never uncover. The haunting voices ensured one truth: Harper's Ridge would never forget the day the children vanished, nor the teacher who led them into the shadows. The whispers were more than sound. They were memory, warning, and accusation, echoing through the town and into the hearts of all who had once felt safe. For the parents of Harper's Ridge, each day after the disappearance was a slow descent into terror. Mothers paced their kitchens, clutching aprons as if they could hold their children close through sheer will. Fathers stared at empty streets, imagining the small faces of their sons and daughters emerging from the shadows of the trees, only to vanish again. Sleep became impossible. Meals were forgotten. The normal rhythm of life shattered. Mrs. Clara Thompson was one of the first to succumb to despair. Her youngest, little Samuel, had followed Miss Harper willingly that morning, laughing as he skipped alongside the other children. Now, Clara's nights were filled with screams that were not her own, cries that pierced the walls of her home. She would wake to the sensation of small hands gripping hers, only to find the empty bed beside her. Every creak in the house became a portent of something worse waiting in the dark. Other mothers fared no better. They formed groups, gathering in kitchens and parlors, whispering about the forest and its malevolent hold. Some blamed Miss Harper, wondering how someone so trusted could lead their children into oblivion. Others blamed themselves, tormented by the thought that a moment of negligence had sent their precious ones into the trees forever. Fathers attempted to channel fear into action, organizing search parties and patrols. Yet even they could not shake the gnawing anxiety. They carried lanterns into the woods, shouting names until their throats were raw, only to return with empty hands and haunted eyes. Each failure deepened the sense of helplessness, the horror of knowing that 18 lives were lost to a forest that refused to give them back. Sleep-deprived nights gave way to strange visions. Parents swore they saw their children at windows in shadows, even in reflections of puddles in the street. Some claimed to hear Miss Harper's soft, melodic voice calling out, "This way, follow me." It was enough to drive the most rational minds toward hysteria. The line between hope and despair blurred. Every day became a test of endurance, every moment a negotiation with grief. The nightmare extended beyond the personal. Families began to turn on one another, suspicion creeping into every interaction. If someone returned home late, neighbors whispered, had they ventured too close to the forest? Could they have been influenced by the same unseen force that took the children? Fear was contagious, spreading faster than any illness, leaving the entire town gripped in shared anguish. Even weeks later, the emptiness lingered. Chairs remained unoccupied at dinner tables. Beds were neatly made, but memories filled them. The forest continued to whisper, carrying the sounds of children's laughter or cries, keeping parents in perpetual torment. Every unspoken sound, every sudden movement, reminded them of what they had lost and what they might never see again. Harper's Ridge had become a town defined by grief. Mothers' nightmares became a communal sorrow, Father's patrols became feudal rituals, and the forest remained an ever-present reminder of the fragility of life, trust, and innocence. The children were gone, and the town itself would never recover from the weight of their absence. By the third day after the disappearance, Harper's Ridge had mobilized like never before. Every able-bodied man and woman joined the search, lanterns swinging in trembling hands, horses straining under the weight of urgency. The forest, once a place of gentle adventure, had become a labyrinth of dread. Volunteers moved in groups, calling names over and over. Each reply was met with silence. The deeper they went, the heavier the air felt. The canopy of trees seemed to close above them, blocking out the sky. Shadows moved with subtle menace, and the occasional snap of a branch made hearts race. Some searchers claimed they heard faint giggles or the soft chant of a teacher guiding her students, but when they turned, nothing was there. Along muddy paths, they found traces, small shoes caught on roots, scraps of clothing, and Miss Harper's own footprints. Each discovery was both a lead and a torment. They confirmed the children had been there, yet offered no hint of where they had gone. The forest seemed to swallow every clue, leaving only frustration and fear. As hours bled into days, the searchers began to fracture. Tension ran high. Arguments broke out over where to look next. Some refused to enter deeper sections of the woods, claiming an unseen force was at work. Others pressed on, driven by desperation and the hope that their children, or neighbors' children, were still alive. Fatigue and despair weighed on them. Lanterns grew dim, stomachs ached, and voices cracked. A small group stumbled upon a clearing at dusk. There, broken twigs formed shapes that some swore were symbols. A makeshift circle of stones surrounded a patch of disturbed earth. The volunteers froze, hearts pounding. One man whispered, "This isn't just a forest, it's a trap." The notion spread like wildfire, turning fear into terror. Superstition and logic collided in their minds, leaving uncertainty as the only certainty. By the fifth day, even the most pragmatic townsfolk began to believe in the unthinkable. The forest had claimed the children. Miss Harper, too, was gone, her intentions and fate swallowed along with them. Parents refused to abandon hope entirely, but sleep was haunted by shadows, the rustling of leaves, and imagined footsteps at the edge of their homes. Search parties continued for weeks, but the woods gave nothing new. Food was left behind for anyone still alive. Messages were carved into trees, but each return to town was met with the same despairing eyes and empty hands. The forest had become a boundary no one dared cross alone, a dark sentinel holding its secrets close. Even after the search officially ended, Harper's Ridge remained haunted. Lanterns were lit nightly at the town's edge, prayers whispered into the darkness. Every child who had walked into those woods was a ghost in the memory of every parent, every friend. And every evening, as the wind rustled through the trees, the whispers began again, reminding the town that the mystery of Miss Harper and her 18 students was far from over. After the search parties returned empty-handed, the town began digging into Miss Evelyn Harper's history. They had to know who she really was and why 18 children had vanished under her watch. What they found only deepened the fear. Evelyn Harper had arrived in Harper's Ridge 5 years earlier. Before that, records showed she had taught in remote areas across Missouri and Arkansas. Her references were impeccable, but there were whispers, subtle, unsettling hints of incidents no one could fully explain. Children had gone missing under her supervision in distant towns, only to return days later, frightened and silent, as if they had experienced something unnameable. Those events had been quietly buried, dismissed as accidents or exaggerations. Locals also discovered that Evelyn had grown up on the outskirts of a small, isolated town. Neighbors remembered tales of her strange fascination with the forest. As a child, she had wandered into the woods for hours, speaking to the trees, collecting odd trinkets, and returning with scratches, bites, and unexplained bruises. Adults whispered that she had been different, and some feared she carried secrets passed down from generations steeped in superstition. Letters surfaced, diaries, handwritten notes tucked away in drawers in her modest house. The words hinted at obsession, the thrill of leading children through nature, the allure of isolation, the call of something unseen. Some passages spoke of guiding them to the other side, language cryptic and chilling. The handwriting shifted from careful to frantic, revealing a mind teetering between brilliance and obsession. Even the few friends Evelyn had in other towns offered mixed accounts. Some described her as extraordinarily kind, a savior for troubled children. Others noted a cold intensity beneath the warmth, a presence that seemed to dominate rooms, as though she could bend wills without speaking. A pattern emerged. Where Evelyn went, children followed, and those who did often carried the weight of an experience they could not explain. This revelation fractured the town further. Parents wrestled with anger, sorrow, and disbelief. How could someone so trusted, so adored, carry such darkness in her past? Did this explain the disappearance in Harper's Ridge, or was there something more sinister at work? Something beyond human understanding? Even now, decades later, the secrets of Evelyn Harper remain part of the legend of Harper's Ridge. Her past provides pieces of the puzzle, but never the full picture. The forest, the children, the whispers, all are tied to her life, her obsessions, and the choices she made on that crisp October morning. Harper's Ridge had trusted her implicitly, and the town paid the price. Fear has a way of unraveling even the strongest communities. In Harper's Ridge, the disappearance of 18 children under the guidance of Miss Harper fractured trust, turning neighbor against neighbor. Every glance carried suspicion, every conversation a whispered accusation. Families began pointing fingers. Some blamed parents who had allowed their children to follow Evelyn Harper without protest. Others claimed that townspeople had ignored warning signs about her past, that collective negligence had doomed the children. Arguments erupted in homes and at the general store, voices rising over minor slights that now seemed monumental. Fear had turned rational minds into conspirators of blame. Even friendships dissolved. Childhood companions stopped speaking, wary of what loyalties the other might hold. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some said certain families had aided Evelyn in secret, or that they had known more than they admitted. Others whispered that the forest itself had a hand in selecting victims, and anyone who spent time near the edge of the trees might have been compromised. The town's unity, once its pride, disintegrated under the weight of suspicion. The church, a supposed sanctuary, became a battleground. Sermons warned against trusting outsiders, even neighbors. Congregants argued over morality, fate, and sin, each interpretation dripping with fear. Nights became sleepless as families feared attacks, kidnappings, or the return of Evelyn Harper herself. Some parents barred their remaining children from going anywhere alone, while others watched the shadows outside their windows with trembling lanterns. Even the authorities were not spared. The sheriff faced criticism for failing to prevent the disappearance, for not following every lead, and for letting the town descend into paranoia. Volunteers accused each other of hiding information. The lines between fact and fiction blurred, as whispers from the forest seeped into daily life, making everyone a suspect or a victim in their own minds. Children who had not gone on the walk began to show signs of trauma. They spoke in whispers of shadows and voices, of strange sensations in the woods. Parents became hypervigilant, interpreting the faintest cough or stumble as a possible warning. Fear became a living entity, feeding on the town's grief and anger, shaping every action, every thought. Harper's Ridge was no longer the serene Kansas town it had been. It was a community haunted, not just by the forest and the lost children, but by its own unraveling. The bonds of trust had been shattered, replaced by suspicion, sorrow, and the gnawing question. If Evelyn Harper could deceive them all, who could they truly trust? The town, once tightly knit, had become a mirror of the forest, dark, tangled, and impossible to navigate without losing oneself. Years passed, but Harper's Ridge never healed. The forest remained a looming presence at the edge of town, silent by day, but whispering at night. People spoke of strange lights between the trees, fleeting shadows, and the faintest echoes of children's laughter carried on the wind. Some claimed that if you listened closely, you could hear Miss Harper's voice, still guiding, still calling. The 18 children were never found. The town held memorials, left offerings at the forest's edge, and recorded every possible clue, but nothing ever surfaced. Families moved away, unable to endure the perpetual fear. Some stayed, burdened by the weight of grief and the haunting question, what had really happened that October morning? Historians later speculated. Some believed Evelyn Harper had led the children to a hidden cave, an underground chamber that swallowed them from the world above. Others argued the forest itself was cursed, a place where time and space bent, and children could vanish without a trace. Superstitions grew over the decades, blending with fragments of Evelyn's mysterious past, forming a legend that refused to fade. Even the youngest children who survived that day carried scars. Their dreams were haunted by the woods, by Miss Harper, by shadows with no shape. They whispered of voices, of being guided somewhere they could not resist, and of the inexplicable fear that clung to them for years. Every townsperson who remembered the day held a fragment of the truth, yet none could piece together the full story. The final mystery remains unsolved. Were the children victims of a dark obsession, led astray by a teacher who dabbled in forces unknown? Did the forest claim them as its own? Or did something entirely unexplainable intervene that day, leaving Harper's Ridge forever haunted? What is certain is that the story left a mark far deeper than the forest ever could. Harper's Ridge became a town defined not by its fields or streets, but by absence, silence, and the whispers that drift on the wind. And even now, over 90 years later, if you stand at the edge of the woods at dusk, you might hear it too, the soft, haunting call of a teacher who led 18 children into the trees, never to return. The town, the forest, and the lost children exist in memory and legend, a chilling reminder that some mysteries are never meant to be solved.